First caller, Martainn, who's a theist from the UK, says they're a Trump supporter ready to drop some epic truth bombs. Hey, Martainn, no offense, pronoun to him. This is a legitimate question. Welcome to the show. Why would we care what a Trump supporter in the UK thinks? I got enough problems here at home.
Well, you actually asked me the same question when I was on last time, and I remember saying you didn't have to care, and then you hung up very quickly. So, or you obviously don't have to care what I think, but if you want to learn, if you want to educate yourself, it's best to listen to what experts have to say. So,
okay.
Yeah, I think
educate us.
Okay, so I think it's ironic that Democrats often call Trump and the Republican Party racist, considering the affirmative action nonsense that they've been spewing. If we look at affirmative action in the US, it is a contentious issue and it does divide popular opinion, but it's very clear that it does discriminate on the grounds of race. So I think my first big reason to support Trump is to ultimately stand up for what's right and to fight back against affirmative action.
Cool. Affirmative action doesn't exist, friend.
Pardon?
Hasn't existed for years. Affirmative action does not and has not existed for years.
Well, I think since 2023, it's been struck down by the US Supreme Court. So you are right.
Stopped well before that, friend. Nope, stopped well before that.
No, that's not correct. If you look at the literature,
yes,
you will find that. Pardon?
He's not looking at the literature. He's looking at the law and the practical effects. This is why they went after woke and DEI, because there was no more affirmative action for them to actually go for. So they went for the next best thing or the next worst thing from their perspective. But do you not think that for example, there's plenty of things that I disagree with and people on, and there's things that I agree on. I think qualified individuals and their criteria should be, their qualifications should be the primary thing. But if we're in a position where we've created a system that unnecessarily and unfairly excludes or devalues some individuals, do you not think that we should do something to try to correct that?
So in terms of affirmative action, I think what proponents use is often a conflation tactic. What they do is they conflate. I
didn't ask you to talk about what people use or what tactics they use. I asked a very specific question about what obligation we might have to make up for systemic, implicit bias in our laws and hiring practices.
Well, I actually think more importantly, Martainn, can you just tell me what you think affirmative action is?
So I would argue that affirmative action in terms of race is giving preferential treatment often to Native Americans, Black and Hispanic candidates, particularly in the university admission system. I would say that affirmative action in terms of socioeconomic...
Oh, great. That doesn't exist. Beautiful.
So in terms of the Harvard versus Students for Fair Admission case in the Supreme Court, that was in 2023. So you're right to claim that affirmative action doesn't exist anymore, but it hasn't existed since 2023.
Didn't exist before that either.
Yes, it did.
It didn't.
It did exist. Yes, it did.
It did not.
On that point, I'm sorry.
I hate to break it to you. When we look at college admissions, white Americans we're still overwhelmingly, even if we're looking at per capita numbers, they were overwhelmingly the people who are being accepted into colleges. And we will look at college aid. They are the bulk recipients of both need-based and merit-based financial aid, more so than their population numbers. So if that's the case, it doesn't seem like anybody else is getting preferential treatment when they're getting the bulk of everything. That's not preferential treatment to another person, right?
No. So here's where the fallacy begins. Just because your group is underrepresented or just because your group is overrepresented doesn't mean that you can't claim that discrimination has occurred. So, for example, I'm a big track and field fan.
No, hold on, because you're making a mistake here. It's not that we're claiming that discrimination isn't occurring. Hold on. It's that your claim is that the other people are getting preferential treatment. How can they be getting preferential treatment? Yes, you did. You said preferential treatment verbatim. I wrote it down. I'm writing down what you say. So you said preferential treatment. If you want to amend that, we'll go off the amendment of what you want to say instead.
No, I don't want to amend what I said. I want to continue saying that preferential treatment existed. Can I cite my source, please?
You can cite whatever source you want, sure.
How do you determine whether or not individuals are getting preferential treatment rather than compensated treatment. Because I would agree that just because there are more white people being admitted to colleges than there are black people in a number of circumstances, that doesn't mean that anything necessarily unjust has happened, because it could just be that white people are just way better than black people, right?
So in terms of, I just want to start my source. My source is a book by Kenny.
I'm sorry, I just asked, I don't know why this is so difficult for you, Martainn. Like, I'm asking questions and you're refusing to answer them.
No, I'll answer every question.
Okay, then answer the question I just asked. Is it a possibility, a likely possibility, that white people are just better than black people?
So if we look at genetic research and race, we find that, as some commentators say, race doesn't exist at the biological level. There's no meaningful behavioral or psychological differences between the races. So no, whites are not better than blacks, or Asians are not better than whites.
How would you explain the disparity? Yeah, you had Jovan ready to go. How would you explain the disparity then in the admissions rates?
So this is a fallacy that Thomas Sowell talks about a lot. He's a former professor at Harvard. The simple fact of there being a disparity doesn't logically...
Martainn, are we in agreement that there's a disparity in admission rates that is divided along racial and ethnic lines?
So if you look at Ivy League admissions, and this is cited in the book by Kenny.
Sorry, I don't know why this is so difficult. That was a yes or no question.
Yeah, I know what happens on this show. You sort of give your callers yes, no questions, and the sort of that got your questions come out. And
No. I'm sorry, but you don't know what happens on the show. You see, people who are honest interlocutors don't ever get down to the let me treat you like a fifth grader or a first grader method of yes or no questions. I'm trying to get to some kind of understanding here, but all you want to do is cite names that I don't give a fuck about and avoid the questions that I think are relevant. And so I don't care who you reference. I'm asking you, if we agree that there's a disparity in admissions rate at colleges as one example, what is your explanation for that disparity if you're already acknowledged that it's not just because white people are probably better than black people? So what's the reason for the disparity?
So you can find a disparity that exists between whites and Asians. Asians are doing better than whites, and it may just be the case that there are cultural differences. There may be greater levels of interest in the Asian community when it comes to going to Harvard. So Asians, on average, are overrepresented in Harvard. And the point that I'm trying to make is the simple fact of there being a disparity doesn't logically entail that there's been discrimination.
Okay,
so,
Martainn,
wait, real quick. This is super important. What was the Harvard case about?
Yeah, great question. So the Harvard case was Harvard and I believe a North Carolina university versus a group that calls itself Students for Fair Admissions. Students for Fair Admissions essentially sued Harvard, saying that Asian students had been discriminated against unlawfully. They acknowledged that although Asians were overrepresented, that didn't entail that they hadn't been victims of discrimination. So can I give a quick analogy?
No. Once again, you're saying you're pretending like I made a case for something when I didn't. I asked you what the explanation was for the disparity, and you, instead of giving an explanation for the disparity, suggested that if there is a disparity, that doesn't logically entail that it was unjust. And I never said it was at all. So let's stop arguing against a straw version of what I'm saying and just answer the question. So once again, what's your explanation for the disparity in admissions rates?
I would probably cite Thomas Sowell's explanation. The simple, reality isn't linear. There are lots of different people, there are different cultures, there are different beliefs. And I don't necessarily need to give a sophisticated explanation of every single thing under the sun.
So basically your answer is you don't know and you don't care. So let me ask you, what about Trump is worth supporting, apart from the fact that he probably also doesn't know and doesn't care?
What's worth supporting is the fact that under Donald J. Trump, Asian Americans finally achieved equal rights under the law. And that's a very proud moment for many in the Asian American community, that ultimately they were no longer discriminated against. And
cool.
I'm very proud of the president.
Well, cool. Are you proud of the president for all the other things, like the tariffs, the elimination of Roe v. Wade, the elimination of the feuds with the Supreme Court and the replacements there, the police state that he's implementing right now?
So I agree with Trump on some issues. I disagree with him on others. I think he was wrong to pull out of Paris during the first administration. I tend to support free trade, so I don't agree with him on everything. Some of the things the Democrats believe are just so ridiculous these days that it's
Like
hard
what?
to imagine why anyone.
What is something the Democrats believe that is just so ridiculous? Because I'm not a Democrat, and I don't agree with him on everything.
Okay, I'll give an example of one of the sort of real Everest of woke insanity, which is trans athletes. That's something that no sane person could defend. And I got to tell you, as someone from New York, the world's kind of what?
Yeah. So
want to bet.
On. How many trans athletes are in the NCAA?
Is it 10? I don't know.
It's less than that, actually. How many of them are taking over and winning and dominating in various fields?
You need to look at the science. And
I'm sorry, I asked a specific question, and I am looking at the science and the actual data. And yes, I am. You're in here spewing information that is incorrect and avoiding answering the question again. You don't know what impact have trans athletes had to sports.
They have undermined the credibility of female sport, because if you allow a man,
no, they haven't. No, they haven't. The only minds in they haven't, Martainn. The only minds in which the credibility of female sports has been undermined is in the mind of bigots who don't understand what actual impact is and who would like to pretend that something bad is going on. The individual bodies and organizations, because every sport is different, have to go and evaluate what is fair and what isn't fair. This isn't just Andre the Giant gets to say, I'm going to compete in the women's field in weightlifting anymore. That is not happening. That is the cartoonish aspect of what's happening. And so trans women are women, trans men are men, non-binary people are non-binary. It is absolutely true. It's right there in the name.
Quick. Before we move down the path of Martainn explaining that he doesn't know the difference between gender and sex, which I feel is coming soon. I know I just want to really quickly hold on. I want to quickly touch back to like something that he's sort of skirted and avoided when Matt asked you why these disparities exist. You went to Thomas Sowell. Thomas Sowell's biggest idea and why disparities exist between white Americans and black Americans is that there's a cultural difference between white Americans and black Americans, and that black Americans collectively have a culture where they don't care as much about education, they don't care as much about work, they don't care as much about these things. Thomas Sowell has said this like expressly time and time again. Are you agreeing with Thomas Sowell here that you think there is something culturally in black Americans that is the reason why they are more likely to be arrested, more likely to be falsely imprisoned, more likely to die of medical neglect, more likely to have lower rates of familial wealth, more likely to be targeted by the education system, more likely to face the school to prison pipeline? Are you saying it's the culture, so like essentially making the argument that it's black people's fault that all of these disparities exist?
So I read some of Thomas Sowell's work. I've sort of looked at some of his books. I've also listened to some of his lectures, and he's a very astute social commentator. Obviously, I haven't lived in America for as long as him, so sometimes you just have to defer to the experts like Thomas Sowell. But I think it's right that we sort of stop this mumbo jumbo about white privilege and all that nonsense. That's already been debunked.
I didn't ask you about white privilege. Right. I've asked you very specifically, do you think the disparities in all of these places are because of black culture?
Well, what Thomas Sowell actually does is he talks about the welfare state as well. He doesn't just talk about culture.
Great. So you agree with him. I'm not asking what Thomas Sowell believes. I'm asking if you agree with him that you think the disparities are from black culture.
I definitely agree with him on a lot of issues, but as he's an expert on these topics, sometimes you have to defer to his authority.
I just need you to understand something, that when it comes to like sociology in the U.S., Thomas Sowell is laughed out of like every academic institution like known to man. Yeah, like nobody takes Thomas Sowell seriously, and they haven't taken. Great. So is Jordan Peterson. That doesn't mean anything, right? He's still mocked in academia. He's mocked in academia.
You're from the UK. Richard Dawkins is an incredibly impressive and well-credentialed biologist, and yet he's a transphobe who I've shared a stage with. Oh, he is a transphobe. He is absolutely a transphobe, as I have done. Martin, if you keep trying to talk over me, I'm going to have to mute you, and I'd rather not do that. So just stop. Richard Dawkins is absolutely transphobic, as we have documented many times by pointing out what he's actually said, including just recently, this week, advocating for a German law that basically boils down to, you know it when you see it, trust your eyes. And he wants to defend real women. What's a real woman, Martainn?
XX chromosomes, no tallywhacker.
XX chromosomes, no tallywhacker. Cool. That's not a woman. That's not a woman.
So there's a lot of circularity in this definition. If you say someone who identifies,
I didn't say anything about circularity or anything else.
I
just rejected it. I just rejected your definition of woman. What are you going to do about that?
Well, you can reject any definition. You know, Richard Dawkins is obviously an esteemed by.
Correct. What's the difference between sex and gender?
So I'm well aware that gender is often referring to socio-cultural stereotypes, things like femininity.
There's nothing about socio-cultural stereotypes that is necessarily dependent on anybody's chromosomes or whether or not they have a prick or are a prick.
Can I ask a question quickly?
No.
Okay, I'm going to ask it anyway.
Why not? You asked the first question without it, so go ahead, ask a question.
So the word gender comes from the Latin word genus. Do you know what the word genus actually means?
Yeah, I don't care where words come from. It's a nonsense argument.
See, so stop, Martainn. Just listen. Let's listen, because you have a horribly broken brain that I'm getting ready to fix. The origin of a word is completely independent from how it's used. Language is our bitch, which is why we don't talk the way Shakespeare talked. And so the origin of the word doesn't matter. For ages, sex and gender were used almost interchangeably to refer to almost the same thing. And then when we learned a little bit more about the broad spectrum of sociology and psychology, we came to understand that we don't need to use two different words to merely refer to someone's chromosomes. And the fact is that people referred to and knew about gender long before anybody knew about chromosomes. You've never investigated the chromosomes of anybody you've been involved with. What we do is we look at individuals' statements about their identity and their behavior and actually look at the sociological constructs, which began with recognitions of differences between sexes, but then became diminished because what used to be, this is what a man is, this is what a woman is, went away when we stopped subjugating people. Oh, wait, we haven't stopped subjugating people. When we stopped incredibly in subjugating people and allowing them to participate equally. Once that begins to happen, the very notion that someone with XX chromosomes or XY chromosomes is irrelevant, because trans people aren't claiming to be cis. Trans people are not claiming that their biology is different from you. If you and a trans person look at their chromosomes, they're not going to tell you that those chromosomes are any different than what you're seeing. They're not talking about what their chromosomes are. They are talking about gender in a different context. And if you just flat out refuse to accept that there is a context of gender, which they are speaking in, and instead say it's just sex, then I get to dismiss your definition of a just sex woman, because you've already dismissed the entirety of the modern, updated, beneficial look at gender. You have disqualified yourself from the conversation. Are there trans people who are claiming their chromosomes are different than what they are? That's a yes or no question.
I mean,
that's a yes or no question. That's a yes or no question. Are there trans people who are claiming that their chromosomes are different than what we actually know their chromosomes to be?
I don't know.
No, you don't.
I haven't met it.
So how do you tell if somebody's cis?
Well, presumably they might. You could look at their chromosomes. You could also look at what they say about themselves. You could look at a whole range of things. But I mean, cis.
So wait, no. When it comes time to identify who's cis, you want to look at their chromosomes, what they say, and a whole range of things. So let's go through what they say and a whole range of things, because that seems to be what you're objecting to for trans people. But when I point out that you can't identify who's cis, now all of a sudden you want to go to other things other than XX no tallywhacker.
No, I'm aware that cis is one of those terms that's been made up recently because we sort of need a normal sounding term for normal people.
Can you tell me real quick, Martainn, can you just tell me a term can you give me one term ever that's not been made up? Just one term.
Well,
any term that's not been made up.
words are created by humans. We don't discover. We discover mathematics.
So then, what does it? So then, when you say the phrase, that's a recently made up word that has no barring on the argument because all words are made up. What does it matter the recency of a word? We didn't have a word for like gaming PCs until recently. Does that mean that we can't call them that? What?
What I'm saying is, cis goes back to Latin origins, and as somebody who tried to do this a minute ago, going back to the origin and etymology of a word, you should know how silly this is for you to try to object to something just because of a modern usage. Some of us are living in the modern world and not the antiquated world.
Yes, obviously words are created, but that doesn't mean that we can easily communicate if we're using the same word to mean different things. Obviously, about half.
You know exactly what cis means. Exactly. You know exactly what it means. You know it means somebody that is not trans. You know that. You're just rejecting it because you think using the term means that you are now accepting of what I would assume you would call quote unquote trans ideology. That's the only reason you're rejecting the word. It has nothing to do with the word, whether the word actually makes sense, because the word makes pretty good sense. If you have someone that is trans, what would you call someone that's not trans?
So everything
there would be an opposite.
So far. Yeah, everything.
What would you call someone who's not trans, Martainn?
Normal.
Normal. Okay.
Normal is fucking subjective. Like what is normal? What if I have a country where everybody in the country is transgender and you show up as a non-transgender person? Now you are not normal, right?
Well, that country probably wouldn't survive for very long if you had everyone.
Why wouldn't it survive for very long if everybody's trans? Do you understand? You don't understand how any of this works. Let me ask you like a very general question, just a base level questions that I'm understanding where you're coming from. Do you believe that gender within humans is a category distinction? It's a way that we categorize people.
I believe that gender and sex, for most of their history, were used as synonymous. Then the Ministry of Truth.
I'm not asking. Sure, great. I agree the same thing. I'm asking if you believe that they are category distinctions. Are they words that are meant to categorize things?
Yeah. So the word gender comes from the Latin genus, which means type or kind. So it's used as a category distinction. Sex is also a category distinction. Race is also a category distinction.
Love that. And do you believe that woman, as a category phrase, is it when we're talking about people that are women or people that are men, that those categories are exclusive categories? There are people that fit into those categories, and there are people that don't fit into those categories.
Yeah, as with race, there are blacks, there are whites, but there are also people who are mixed race as well. And the fact that there are mixed race people doesn't mean that I can just identify as black.
Mixed race doesn't exist, but great. So I love that we agree that no, mixed race doesn't exist. I love that we agree that categories can be exclusionary, and we believe that woman is an exclusionary category. Great. Because it is an exclusionary category, that means there must be some sort of condition that is necessary to fit into this category that everyone who's in the category has and everyone who's outside of the category does not have. So what is that necessary condition required of someone to be a woman?
XX chromosomes.
Okay, beautiful. Love that you said that.
Can I ask something real quick?
Best thing I've ever heard.
I really want Jovan to keep going, but I have one quick question. If a woman is XX no penis, how do you propose we verify who is or isn't a woman?
You can use genetic tests. So the World Athletics Federation.
Does a genetic test tell you whether or not there's a penis?
Well, if it had been amputated, then it wouldn't necessarily tell you that. If you'd suffered an injury,
no. There may or may not be what qualifies as a penis. My question here is about individual privacy. Should anyone have the right to inspect my genitals or investigate and inspect my chromosomes?
So unless you are under suspicion of having committed a serious crime, no one's allowed to inspect that against your will. So the answer is no, unless you're...
Cool. So you have a completely useless position. But once somebody's committed a crime, why would anybody need to investigate their chromosomes or their genitalia just because they've committed a crime?
No, I just meant if someone was suspected of having committed a crime, then depending on the nature of the crime, they must be forced to undergo an inspection. But I think we're getting away from the topic, though. This point.
No, we're not getting away from the topic. We're exposing the ridiculous position that you have. What crime could I commit where it would be necessary for somebody to investigate my genitals and my chromosomes?
Illegally smuggling cocaine.
Are you just pranking us, Martainn? Because I would love to have Jovan keep having fun with you.
Yo, low-key, that was kind of funny.
I think you just outed yourself as a complete fraud. What is it about smuggling cocaine that would require someone to investigate my chromosomes and my junk?
If you
I can't fit cocaine up my pee hole. I don't know about you.
Yeah.
That hole is way too small to fit cocaine up.
Yeah, like your friend said.
Wait, you think that if I've been convicted of smuggling cocaine, that gives them a good reason to investigate my penis and my chromosomes?
No, not your chromosomes. You can't
Let me look at that penis,
I specifically asked you, if your criteria is chromosome plus genitalia, what crime could I possibly commit that would warrant someone investigating both my chromosomes and my genitalia?
No, you pulled me down a massive rabbit hole where you asked me.
No, I didn't pull you down a massive rabbit hole. I'm just 10 miles smarter than you are on this subject. And I led you down the merry path that you established. You said what this was, what defines the particular gender. And I said, under what criteria would someone even need to or have a right to access to my chromosomes or genitalia? And then you said, if I committed a certain crime, and I asked you what crime I would commit that would warrant someone investigating my chromosomes and my genitalia. I didn't lead you anywhere. You marched right down to the trough I have put in front of you. So eat your shit sandwich.
The penis trough.
No, you asked me.
You don't know that.
Your questions.
Oh, got your questions. You know why got your questions work? You know who got your questions don't work on? The people who know what the fuck they're talking about.
I want to, before we get too far away from it, Martainn, I want to just contend with your necessary condition real quick. So you made the claim that it is necessary for women to have XX chromosomes. So I need to ask you about this. We have plenty of medical cases of women who have this one. If you want to look it up, it's in the NIH. It's a case study of women with pure 46 XY karyotyping who have not only gotten pregnant but given birth. So
yes,
are they? What are they?
You have Sawyer's. I can't remember the name. I think it's Sawyer's syndrome. But
Swires.
You have.
Yes.
You have
what are those people though? Are they women or are they men?
You have women. They're intersex.
Intersex is not in and of itself its own gender. It's a condition that affects males and females.
Yeah, which is what I just said.
Intersex.
Those individuals are intersex.
Okay, well, so what are they? Male? Are they men or are they women?
They're intersex.
Intersex is not in and of itself a gender category.
Yeah. I mean, are you saying intersex is a third gender category?
I'm saying intersex is intersex. You can call it what you want.
Oh, no.
You don't get to do this. Stop skirting around answering the question, yo. What the fuck?
This is you, yeah.
Why are you skirting around the question? Is somebody who's intersex, do they have their own category when it comes to gender, or are intersex or DID conditions that affect males and females?
So I'm happy to give them their own category as intersex.
Cool. Which sports team should they play for?
They should have their own category. The
intersectional.
Yeah.
Martainn. So you're making a lot of category errors.
Basketball team.
You're making like a ton of category errors here, and it's no, I'm not. Honestly, it's people. Honestly hilarious. No, you aren't. Right? Do humans reproduce dimorphically? Are we a species that we sexually reproduce dimorphically?
We are sexually dimorphic species in that we're primates.
Okay. So that means how many sexes are there?
So di means two. So you have
does that come from the Greek or the Latin?
So is intersex a third sex category, or are they conditions that affect the two sex categories?
Well, it's better for categorization if you have men, women, and then you also have a very small number of people, less than 1 in 1,000, who would be described as intersex.
But they should have their own basketball team. So somebody who's intersex, somebody who's intersex, wait. Somebody who's intersex, they have XY chromosomes, they have a uterus, they have a vagina, they can get pregnant, they can give birth, they have estrogen, they have feminine hormones. This person is in a third category. They aren't a male, they aren't a female, they're something completely different.
Well, that they're referred to as intersex. I don't see why the term is too triggering.
Intersex is a term we use for a list of conditions that affect male and female sexual development. It is not in and of itself a category of sex. It is condition. That's why it's not actually called intersex. They are called intersex conditions, which are conditions that affect the two sexes.
Yeah, but I mean, essentially, I started by talking about trans athletes. You weren't able to defend your anti-trans position.
Oh my God, Martainn, in order to have the conversation about trans athletes, your presupposition in this is that trans women are not women. That's your presupposition. So we have to attack the presupposition, in order to get to, hold on. Your presupposition is trans women are not women. That's the presup, right? Because you're saying they shouldn't be allowed to compete because they might have some advantage because they're not women, they shouldn't get to compete against other women. However, me and Matt both believe that whether there's an advantage or not, women should be able to compete against other women. So yes, we do have to talk about the presupposition.
Can I ask a question? Have you got any scientific sources to back up your position? Because I have plenty of scientific studies to back up
my position that trans women are women? Yeah, I'm trying to give you one now, but in order to give you this...
The sport.
The sport what?
Issue. Do you have any scientific studies to back up your position on sport?
Studies about what? Because I don't care that there's an advantage in sports. So what study do I need to provide you to say that I don't care that there's an advantage? What study do I need to provide you about that?
Well, now you've told me.
My argument is whether there's an advantage or not, if you're a woman, you should be able to compete against women. That's my take.
Okay, so this is where you're wrong, because ultimately you're trying to dichotomize sex and gender, but you're ignoring the fact that categories in sport are based upon sex, not upon this notion of gender that has been redefined recently. So even if we accept the dichotomy between sex and gender, it still doesn't logically follow that we have to have.
Okay, so wait. Okay, great. So you accept that trans women are women. Now we can move on to whether the sexes should be competing in sports. It's totally fine. If you want to accept that trans women are women, if you want to accept this, then we can move on. If you don't want to accept this, this is the way we have to have the argument first, right?
I accept.
Because now the conversation becomes if you have a genetic advantage in sports, should you be allowed to compete with people without that genetic advantage?
No, that's begging the question. That's a fallacy.
It's not begging the question. Begging the question is a fallacy, but that's not begging the question. The issue here is that you're establishing a criteria where the dividing line on sports and seemingly all sports should be chromosomes only, and then you can ignore any genetic advantages or disadvantages that might come out of that.
I'm not ignoring
I'm not fucking finished talking, so you should stop saying no. Is that pretty clear there, Martainn?
It's pretty clear, but what's also clear is that we need to look at the science.
I'm sorry. Evidently, it wasn't clear because right after you said it was clear, you decided to run your fucking mouth again, and that's just not going to work for me. Are we clear?
Yep.
Thank you. So if the criteria for establishing sports teams should be based also on chromosomes and setting aside any advantage or diversity amongst those things, then where should trans men compete? Because you only care about trans women, just like every other bigot.
So here's the thing. I've heard this sort of got your question before, and I have...
I'm sorry. I don't need your history with this gotcha question. I need you to answer it. I don't know what you think this is, but I give zero shits about your background or history on this or any other subject. You are a non-entity to me. You are not a man. You are not a woman. You are not binary. You are not a thinker. You are nothing. All I care about is the answer to the questions and your thoughts on this. So are you going to answer the question?
So I would say that trans men are competing in men's sport is like a 16-year-old competing in adult sport because they don't have an unfair advantage and because they are technically taking testosterone, which will be considered doping in the female category. There is a pragmatic argument for allowing them to be included in the male category, which would then become an open category. So I've heard people debate this issue before.
I don't know why you didn't just answer it that way to begin with. Why is it that you feel the need to obfuscate and avoid and editorialize?
To illuminate.
Because I'm sorry, I wasn't done with my fucking question yet. Never mind. I have nothing further for you, but I will let Jovan play with you like a chew toy for as long as he feels like it.
Good luck to him.
Yeah, I have a very simple question for you, Martainn. Like, it's super simple. If I have a cisgender woman who, due to some genetic variant, some biological reason, has as much advantage in sports as a cisgender man, right? For some reason, their body just produces testosterone at the same level as a cisgender man. Their body builds muscle in the same way as a cisgender man, all of these things. Should this cisgender woman be allowed to compete in sports against other cisgender women that don't have this biological advantage?
So again, this is another fallacy which stems from a category error.
No, I'm sorry. I said I was done with you, but you've made a liar out of me. A question cannot be a fucking fallacy, you dipshit. In Latin, in Greek, in old times, in modern times, a question is not a fallacy. Arguments are fallacious, not questions. Please stop just thinking you can hand wave away legitimate questions for you to defend your position by saying the question is fallacious, because you end up looking dumber than a sack of fucking hammers.
Well, I can't be dumb when I identify as so
That was an
smart.
insult to hammers.
You no.
You got the
whether
whole
or
club
not you
chuckling right now, bud.
identify as smart, you wish you were clever, little baby, is independent from how smart you actually are. See, you're free to tell me, you are free to tell me that you think you're smart. And then when we try to go through, and I'm sorry, I'm still fucking talking. I don't know why this is difficult for you, but it clearly is. You're free to tell me that you're smart, but then we need to go through and have a discussion about what criteria we're going to use to try to establish whether or not you're smart.
But if
nothing like laughing at your own jokes, huh, Martainn? Nothing like laughing at your own jokes. Can you just answer the question? Where should this cisgender woman compete? Should she compete against other cisgender women, even though her body effectively functions as the same way a cisgender man's would?
Yeah, so I heard this question. Forrest used it again with sort of Michael Phelps having genetic advantages like big hands, big feet. And
I'm not asking about big hands, big feet.
We didn't mention Forrest either.
I'm asking if their body functions effectively. They're able to build muscle mass, maintain muscle mass. They have hormones similar to that of cisgender men. All of these things, yet they are XY women. Right? Like I'll use language you understand, XY woman. If this is the case, in which category should they be allowed to compete?
So a woman who has XY chromosomes should be allowed to compete with other women, but ultimately you're committing a category error if you allow someone with XY chromosomes who's a man to compete.
So hold on. So
did you just say that there are XY women and XY men?
Wait. You hold on. I understand what you were going to say, and you've functionally defeated your argument. You have taken your argument out back and committed an old yeller. You've taken your argument to the alley and you've stomped it out. If the argument, which I asked you at the beginning of the sports conversation, if it was just about, I said women should compete with women, and you said, but it's not about that. It's because of this unfair advantage. So then so now I've asked you. Hold on, Martainn, hold on. So now I've asked you about an unfair advantage in which a woman will have the same advantages of a cisgender man. You've said they should still be allowed to compete, right? You said they should still be allowed to compete.
When I said XY, I meant to say XX chromosomes.
There are XY women. There are women who have XY chromosomes. There's a reason why I said XY women. Yeah, yes, there are. So again, it's
I
said that for a specific reason. So hold on. We can take take a woman with XX, right? Maybe the SRY gene expressed itself on her second X chromosome, which it is known to do sometimes. So let's say there is a woman with XX chromosomes who has the muscle mass of a cisgender man, is able to build the muscle masses of a cisgender man, has the hormone levels of a cisgender man, has the height and the strength of a cisgender man. Should they be allowed to compete in the women's category? Let's take a random sport. Let's say volleyball. Should they be allowed to compete in volleyball against other cisgender women?
Yes, if you have a talent for a sport, for example, if you're 7 foot tall, you're likely to be very good at basketball compared to someone of average height. If you have talent, don't care.
You just again took your argument out back. You shot it in the face. You stared it down, and while it was sitting on the ground, breathing, drooling blood, you said, "That's what you deserve. I'll be back for round 2 later." If the argument is that the reason why transgender athletes should not compete is because their biology gives them an advantage of that, because in your mind, because their biology is so different because of the male features, all of which I said this woman would possess, these male specific biological traits. If those are the thing that makes it so they can't compete, then that should be across the board. We should, for everything, say if you're a cisgender woman and your testosterone reaches above this level, you should not be able to compete, because that's the actual thing we're worried about. It's not about if they're trans. It's about if they meet these which you told me, it wasn't about them being women. It was about them having these advantages. So now the advantages don't actually matter.
No, what I'm saying is that the British Medical Journal published research, which I believe was initially conducted at a US Air Force base, and it found very clearly that they had an unfair advantage. And, since starting this conversation, you haven't actually cited a single scientific source, not one.
Martainn, because I'm not making a scientific argument, Martainn. I'm not making a scientific argument.
By the way,
I'm not making an argument at all. I'm deconstructing your argument.
What is the science that define? What is the science? What is the science that defines unfair? Because a journal finding that someone has an unfair advantage is not something that I would consider science. Science might find that someone has an advantage. Whether or not it's unfair is not a scientific question. So which scientific journals are claiming that this is unfair, and what is their criteria for fairness?
So there is an or-is fallacy, and so I'm aware that there's a difference between science and more abstract concepts like justice. So I'm
sorry, I specifically asked which scientific journals are making declarations of what is fair or unfair, or is that you making an assertion about what's unfair based on differences that science has found?
Well, Matt, here's the fun part. Here's the fun part. Martainn is saying that the reason why these journals are claiming that it's unfair is because when you look at the physiology of these trans athletes, they have some immense advantage. And yet, when I asked Martainn about somebody with an immense advantage who would have the same advantages that these people would have, all of a sudden this person can compete. Why is it not fair? Why is it not unfair to go against this person? But it's okay. It's fair to go against it. That don't make no sense.
I also know you can't answer me a question right now. I also have to apologize on behalf of someone in chat to you, Martainn. Somebody in chat, while you were getting ratioed and mocked, suggested that you punched yourself in the nuts. And I need to apologize because nobody here has any evidence that Martainn has any nuts, and nobody here has any right to investigate Martainn to find out if he does have nuts until he smuggles some cocaine.
So as I've explained, you've cited 0 scientific sources because your argument...
Holy shit, Martainn.
As we've explained to
Martainn.
You... Martainn.
We haven't cited scientific sources. Literally, we're not making a scientific claim. We're not making one at all. I'm not making a scientific claim. You are.
As a matter of fact,
so we're deconstructing your claim. And I don't know if you know this, but when we're deconstructing your claim, we're looking at the reasons, right? If you don't want a trans athlete and a cisgender athlete to compete together, there is a reason for that. And your stated reason is because of an unfair advantage given by their biology. Yet, in other instances, when someone has an unfair advantage given by their biology, you would still allow them to compete, even though they have that unfair advantage. So what this is me showing is that you are logically inconsistent. Can you say that with me one time? Logically inconsistent?
Because I muted him, but I'm going to unmute him because we've been on this call for 43 minutes. So I have one question for Martainn. It's a yes or no question, and Martainn's answer will determine whether or not this call continues or whether or not Martainn will have to call back some other time. So here's the question for you, Martainn. Is fairness a scientific question?
No, it's not. It's a...
No. It was a yes or no question, and you added words to it and tried to rehabilitate it. Are there reliable scientific journals that have concluded an unfair advantage?
No, if you're going to.
No, there are not. And that was also a yes or no question. No, there are not, because it's not a scientific question. It's just like when dipshits like Chris Langan think that math proves God. There's no variable for God. There's just like people who think that, oh, I can't test the supernatural, but I can make an inference and determine that the supernatural is there. Theism is just as unjustified as everything that you've said, and you've been dishonest. So Jovan and I aren't citing scientific journals because we're challenging your, stop talking. You will never speak to me again today. That's just a done deal. Like, I'll mute you if you want. Okay, you're done talking to me for today. Scientific journals don't make proclamations of fairness. Scientific journals don't conclude God exists. Scientific journals do not make statements of certainty or declarations of truth or fact. Scientific findings are presentations of models that are proposed to best explain a particular set of criteria, or to report on the data that identifies and labels and categorizes those criteria. But the categorizations don't include, by your own admission, thank you very much, fairness. So when you said there are scientific journals that have concluded that trans women have an unfair advantage, you were a liar. I gave you an opportunity a few minutes ago because I asked you directly if there were scientific journals that concluded that, or if that was you adding the unfairness, because you know what that would be, fallaciously? Poisoning the well. You want to take the scientific findings and add your own little poisoned pellet pill in there so that you sound like you know what you're talking about, and you sound like you are on sound footing. See what I did there? I love alliteration. I love poetry. I love all that stuff like that. You know what else I did? I schooled you on both science, epistemology, trans issues, gender, sex, and all of this because you called in to say that you support Trump because you've bought into some notions about affirmative action and that the left is just ridiculously woke on trans issues, which represents a tiny fraction of a tiny portion of the population and a tiny fraction of sports. You have fallen.
Well, don't forget, he also thinks blacks are like culturally worse than whites. Don't forget that part.
Yeah, you know, but he's stupid, so I'm not going to beat him up for all of it. I figured I'd leave you some stuff there. So thank you very much for your time, Martainn. We have thoroughly enjoyed it. And I don't say that lightly. I literally sent messages to Arden saying, this is too much fun. And I'm going to let Jovan joust with this guy. And then I'm lining up another shot after Jovan's done. Because you're either a fraud and just trying to get, clickbait attention, or maybe provide some content for us, or really clueless. And I have no way of telling which one's which, just like you have no way of telling whether someone is cis or trans. I have no way of telling whether or not somebody's really an atheist, whether they're really hungry, whether they are really a fan of this subject. But I can tell that the people who like to trot out so-and-so said this and a scientific journal said this, and that's a fallacy, when every time they tried to identify a fallacy, it was in response to either a question or a statement and not to an actual argument. So you don't know enough about fallacies. You cannot play at my level. Call back some other time.
Hey, if you liked that clip, you'd love the whole thing. Hit like, subscribe, leave a comment, patreon.com/calltheline. That one sucked. Use it.